What we're going to talk about in science today is the properties of matter. So I'm going to go to classwork, I'm going to go to our notebooks, and I'm going to find our science notebook.
Do we do that too?
No, that's okay. We're going to look at the notes together.
I love that guy.
Okay.
Okay.
So, properties of matter. Yes, Kaylee.
Me and Jaylene have the same LOLs. It's too dark in here. At least I got it.
Okay. 4 properties of matter. Properties of matter are things about an object. So I have my object here, my blue stress ball. Things about an object that we can measure or that we can see. Okay. So a property of matter could be like the color, because you can see that this is blue. It could be something like the size, because I can take a ruler and I can measure how long it is from one end to the other end. The ones we're focusing on, or the ones we're going to talk about, are mass. That's the amount of matter in an object. So next to it, you see how we have this picture of a weight. Mass, sometimes people will confuse it with weight because we kind of think of them similarly. The more mass something has, the heavier it feels. So if you guys have ever helped mom or dad when they buy something big like a new TV or something, and there's big, huge pieces of styrofoam inside the box, even though those pieces are really, really big, those pieces of styrofoam aren't very heavy. There's not a lot of mass to them. Because even though they look really big, you can pick them up pretty easily. They're not very heavy. Other things, like let's say a little chunk of metal or a rock, even though it's a lot smaller, might be kind of heavy to pick up because it has more mass. There's more stuff there. Volume is the amount of space that an object takes up. So for something that's like a square or a cube, it's pretty easy to figure out how much space it takes up. You can just measure it and do some math. But for things that kind of have a weird shape, like the stress ball or little Captain America, there's a test that you can do, and you can kind of see it here on the side. So you'd have to measure, like they did here, measure some water, how much water you have. You'd put the rock or whatever it is, like in my case, the Captain America or the stress ball. You'd drop it in the water, and you see how the water changed. It went up when they added in the rock. However much the water goes up, that's the volume of the rock. That tells you how much space it takes up. All right, let me zoom out a little bit. Okay, phase of matter. Phases of matter, we're going to talk more
Can I
about.
use something else?
For phase of matter, we're going to talk more about it a different day. But phases of matter, the ones that we focus on, are solids, liquids, and gas. Now, every time I say gas, someone thinks, oh, like the stuff that we put in the car. In science, when we say that something is a gas, we're not talking about the kind that goes in your car. When you say gas, what you're talking about is like air. Air is a gas. Helium that they use to fill up balloons so they can float, that is a gas. Or like some of you guys, if you have the stove that when you turn it on, you see the fire, that uses gas. It burns the gas. Temperature, we're pretty familiar with that. You know that if you get sick, sometimes mom or dad will take a thermometer and they'll take your temperature to see how sick you are. So temperature is just a measure of how hot something is. The hotter it is, the higher the temperature. The colder it is, the lower the temperature. Magnetism. Who here has magnets in their house? Raise your hand. Probably a lot of us.
What?
I'd say probably almost all of us would have magnets in our house somewhere. Sometimes they're on our fridge, or sometimes they're in our room. Sometimes people use them to hold things up.
Can I
Magnetism.
use something else?
That's fine, Nakai. Magnetism is a force that pulls things together or pushes them apart. If you have magnets in your house, you know that sometimes when you try to take two magnets, and you try to push them together, sometimes they'll kind of like pull toward each other and they'll stick. And sometimes when you try to push them together, it's almost like there's a force field and you have to press really, really hard to make them go any closer. So sometimes magnetism pulls things together, and sometimes it pushes them together, and sometimes it pulls them apart. It just depends on the magnet. And again, sometime we'll talk about that more later on. The last one is something called density. And for density, I wanted to show you all this picture. Density tells you how close together all those little molecules and atoms are next to each other. So I'll show you an example here. So in this picture, you see how in one, all these little bubbles are super, super close together, right? There's not a lot of space here. And in the next one, you see how it has these big gaps? That's what density tells you. How close together is all of that squished together? Is it real squished together, or are there big holes and gaps in there? Usually, if something is not very dense, it's not very heavy unless you have a lot of it. Now, the reason why this is important is density is how you can help figure out if something will float. The less density it has, it will float. If it has more density, it'll sink. Okay?
Can I use it?
That's fine, Nakai.
It's a magnetics.
Okay. Before we started, I asked you all to go and get an item, and we're going to use it, and I'm going to show you how. If I go to my Google Classroom, and I go to Classwork, Science, I find an assignment in here called Properties of Matter. What we're going to do is we're going to test these different items that we have, okay? There's a couple of things that we're going to fill out. Number one, what object did you pick? So you're just going to write down whatever it is that you picked. So if you picked a little toy like this, I could put a Captain America figure or Captain America toy. But I chose this, so I would put stress ball. That's what I picked. And then you got to start telling me about the properties of matter. So what color is it? Some of you might have items like
I
this
can't
one.
see anything.
Well, make sure that you try to find my screen, Nakai, and then press the push pin button. Some of you might have an item that has more than one color. Mine is just blue. If I had picked this, I might have a couple of colors to put down. Because it's got blue, it's got white, got a little bit of tan here, it's got red. There's a few colors on there. So if you have more than one color, go ahead and just write down all the colors you can see on that object. Yes, Jaylene.
Where do we go again?
This is going to be in the Google Classroom, under Classwork, in the science topic, and it's called Properties of Matter. This one might be kind of tough for some of you. What shape is the object? So you're just going to have to tell me as best you can what shape it is. With my object, I'd say probably, I'd put that as shaped like an egg. That's what it looks like. It looks like an egg. If I had something like this, I would say it's shaped like a person, because it kind of is. It's got a head, little arms, little tiny feet. So it's shaped like a person. How does it feel? What's the texture like? So you're going to have to kind of rub it and see, does it feel furry or fuzzy? Is it rough and scratchy? Is it smooth? Is it soft? You could try squeezing it. Is it hard or is it squishy? These are the two tests we have to run. Number one, is your object magnetic? So you're going to have to take whatever your object is, or sorry, in my case, it's this. You're going to take it to something in your house that's metal and touch it and then let go. If your object sticks, you know it's magnetic. One thing that works really well is refrigerators. Refrigerators are usually magnetic. So if you take your object, you go and touch your refrigerator with it and you let go, if it falls, it's not magnetic. If it sticks there, it is magnetic. The last
Can
part.
I go to the restroom?
Sorry, what was that, Christopher?
Can I go to the restroom?
Go ahead.
Okay.
The last thing you're going to do is this one, depending on your object, you could use a glass, or you might need to use like the sink in the bathroom or even the bathtub. But I don't think any of us have items that are that big. What you're going to do, and I'll show you. Give me a second. You need a glass or a cup, or again, you could use the sink. You're going to take your item and you're not going to throw it in there. You're going to take it, put it in the water, and then let go. So mine, I can see it didn't float down to the bottom, or didn't sink down to the bottom, so I know that it floats. So I want you to go ahead, take your item, and start filling in these parts here, okay?
Can I do this after?
We're doing it right now, Nakai. So go ahead, start filling in the parts that you know, and then for the, if it's magnetic or if it'll sink, go ahead and start testing that.